everybody, it's Mama to Wife One. Thank you guys so much for clicking on my video and coming back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm a content creator, I'm a social media influencer, I'm also a published author, I am a speech writer, I'm a speech giver, I am an editor, and I do just a lot of things that have to do with spoken word. And as my name suggests, I am a mom of two and I'm also a wife of one. On this channel, I talk about a few things, but I love watching TV and I especially love watching a good documentary or docuseries. A lot of people in my circle don't really watch documentaries like I do. So I feel like the only people who could probably relate to me are other people who may like documentaries, and I'm hoping this will reach those people who like that kind of stuff so we can talk about it together. So we're continuing our series with the Mr. McMahon docu-series that's on Netflix, the 6 episodes. We are on episode 4. This episode is called Attitude. Before I do my review and recap, make sure you like this video, share this video, subscribe to my channel, and also always comment below. I love talking with you guys. So what I will say is my main complaint in the first 3 episodes of this docu-series and the first 3 episodes of my video series is how we're not really getting to the nitty-gritty of Vince McMahon, the man. It's all about kind of his persona and his job, but we're not learning a lot about him. There's not a lot of vulnerability there, and that we're not hearing about women wrestlers. So I will say, and I keep saying, I'm going to hold on hope because we have more episodes left. This episode actually touched on both of those things, not long enough, in my personal opinion, but at least we got a glimpse of both of those things that I've been complaining about for the past 3 episodes. So I was like, okay, all right, we're getting somewhere. Now we just need to build on it in the last 2 episodes. So we'll see what happens. So I have my notes. So I'll be looking at my notes frequently. One of the things episode 3 ended with Vince McMahon becoming a character in the show or a character in WWE, then WWF, where instead of just being the promoter and being behind the scenes and coming up with the storylines and the scripts and all that stuff, now he's actively like the evil boss who's there to tear people down and tell people what to do and, just kind of be this really over exaggerated characterization of the establishment. So that's where we ended off of episode 3. This episode starts with him talking about his favorite wrestler, a guy named Dr. Jerry Graham. Never heard of him before, but he was a bad guy who basically wrote his own rules, did what he wanted to do. And Vince McMahon, because he comes from a long line of people who are wrestling promoters, he got to meet Dr. Jerry Graham, and Dr. Jerry Graham kind of took him under his wing, and he got to see the benefits or just the power that comes with being a bad guy in wrestling. And he was always inspired to do that. And he actually wanted to wrestle, and his father wouldn't let him. So he did talk about that, about his childhood and how his father kind of discouraged him from being on the entertainment side of things and focusing more on the business side. And this man, he's proven throughout this documentary that he is not a one-trick pony. It's like, look, if I want to do 3, 4, 5 different things, I'm going to do 3, 4, 5 different things. I'm not going to just do promotion. I'm not going to just be the announcer. I'm not going to just wrestle. I'm doing everything in between, including hiring people and writing scripts and doing all this other stuff. That's the kind of person that he seems to be, right? So after everything that happened with Bret Hart that we talked about last episode, he's going to turn that into a business move. Everyone already saw him as the bad guy for that. So he was like, you know what? I'm going to build on this. I'm going to really become the bad guy that everybody wants me to be. And at this time, they're still reeling from the low ratings of WWF Raw compared to WCW Nitro. And I told you last episode, WCW had been beating them 83 straight weeks in a row in the ratings. So they're trying to figure out what can we do to bring more people back to us. They're like, WCW has a handle on older people. We kind of have like the younger crowd. We basically need to go quote unquote bad. So WWF enters what they call their Attitude Era. So like WCW that had New World Order with like this trio of bad guys. It's actually this company of bad guys who again are anti-establishment and we're gonna do this, we're gonna do what we want to do, we're wearing all black leather, whatever. WWF's answer to that was D-Generation X. And I got excited because this is the era of wrestling when I started watching. I know D-Generation X. I remember the whole suck it thing in high school. All the guys did that. And I was like, okay, this is feeling familiar. I get this. And enter Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, Stone Cold has always been my favorite wrestler. So when I saw him on screen, I was like, ah, Like the high school girl in me that was just watching wrestling for the first time was just I was transported all over again. I was like, oh my gosh, I love Stone Cold. Like I loved him as a character. He was always my favorite wrestler. And I remember my high school boyfriend at the time, he loved WCW, and WCW had a similar white, bald, I don't know if he was Southern, but this kind of white, bald, mean wrestler named Goldberg. I was like, Goldberg ain't got nothing on Stone Cold. I never seen Goldberg a day in my life, but I can already tell you that Stone Cold is the best ever. And I still hold true to that. So I was really excited to see him. And let me see. So basically, their whole vibe was to get grittier and dirtier. And so they're showing, Triple H, and, they still have Shawn Michaels. And like I said, they bring in Stone Cold. And they started changing the writing of some of the scripts and the storylines to appeal to older males because these are the main people coming to their events. And you still got some kids. For the most part, they need to appeal to that 18 to 35-year-old crowd. And that's the crowd that WCW really had a handle on. So a lot of their stuff kind of changed. And with Stone Cold, he's this blue collar guy drinking beer, foul mouth, cursing people out all over the place. And he actually was with WCW and with ECW, which I'm not overly familiar with ECW, but I know ECW is, from the way they explained it, it's like pure wrestling. They don't like deal with the storylines. They're not dealing with like characters. It's just actual, just wrestling. That's all it is. And Vince McMahon saw Stone Cold doing that and was like, oh, we need that kind of energy over here. And so what happened is what made everything so great is that you have Stone Cold again, who's this blue collar guy who's like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. That's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so, all of that bravado. It turned into Stone Cold against Vince McMahon. And every episode, it was Vince McMahon as the big bad boss saying, you need to stay in line and don't do X, Y, and Z. I can fire you anytime I want to. And Stone Cold saying, I dare you to fire me and you ain't going to do nothing. And then basically having these battles in the ring. And you see Stone Cold like beating Vince up when he's in the hospital and pouring cement on Vince McMahon's new Ferrari or whatever. And it turned into this big thing where every week people would tune in to see what kind of shenanigans they would get into, to see how they're like butting heads against each other. And at that time, what they say is during that time in general, in the media, in like movies and music, you had that feeling of not teenage, but just kind of an angst. People who want to have more control, who are tired of people telling them what to do, who are wearing, the black leather and have the dark hair. And they're like, you know what, forget this. I'm tired of being everybody's puppet. I'm going to go ahead and handle stuff myself. It was kind of that mode at the time. So Stone Cold fit right into what was happening in society, and it just made everybody tune in. And they showed like the phenomenon of Stone Cold and how everyone had Austin 316 shirts. And I never had that shirt, but I remember seeing that everywhere. Whenever he wrestled, you would just see Austin 316 shirts and signs and just people wearing his signature black leather vest with like no shirt underneath it. And like he had the black, like little bikini bottoms. And Stone Cold was everywhere. It was like an instant sensation. And it was great. And another thing they talked about is how whenever they had these big matches, they always talk about how wrestling is fake. And Vince McMahon says all the time, like, this is about entertainment. Yes, these are actual athletes. Yes, they're doing actual moves. But at the end of the day, when it comes to really big matches, Vince McMahon would decide who the winner was going to be. Now, he would at least tell the winner that they were supposed to be the winner. I don't know if he told both people. I'm kind of curious to know if he did that. But that is something that he controlled. And another thing I was excited about when they were showing some of D-Generation X, they showed China, rest in peace to her. Remember loving China just because it was a woman being seen kind of in a different light. And they kind of delve into this a little bit, a little later on in the in this episode, about women and how, they had the bra and panties matches and just things that wouldn't really fly now, but just women who are sexualized, overly hypersexualized in the ring, whether they're wrestling or not. They're being stripped of their clothes in the ring. A woman who took off her shirt and instead of having a bra on, she had these like black painted hands on both of her breasts. And just the tiniest thong, not even just underwear, but an actual like tiniest G-string thong on in front of the ring, in front of a live audience. And it's like, okay, and I remember seeing that, and at the time, I didn't understand that it was a problematic. Obviously, as an adult now, I get it. And they had Trish Stratus, who I remember as a wrestler. They had her kind of interviewed her about it, And again, I was happy that, okay, we're finally talking about women and women in wrestling and how they were portrayed and all this stuff. That lasted probably, I want to say 90 to 180 seconds that they talked about women wrestlers. And they specifically talk about women wrestlers during the Attitude Era, where they were constantly pushing the button every single week. And I mean, with the whole suck it thing with Generation X, with some of the men coming out in little bikini briefs, but they had like stuffed it full of socks and people putting up the middle finger. And again, you got Stone Cold cursing people out. So they were pushing the envelope every week in a lot of different ways. So they talked about women during that era specifically. And again, they only talked about it for like a couple minutes or so. So it's kind of disappointed, but I'm like, okay, at least they mentioned it. And I was all excited, like, oh, yes, finally. And as soon as I wrote the word finally in my notes, they went on to another topic. I was like, okay, well, we had something. And since they talked about a specific era in this episode, I'm hoping that we'll get a little bit more about the women in the next two episodes. We'll see. I mentioned how they finally showed a little bit of the vulnerability of Vince McMahon. Like I said, when he was a child, he wanted to wrestle, and his dad wouldn't let him. So they show pictures of Vince McMahon from when he was a child, and he talks about how he came up with this character of the Mr. McMahon character in WWF, who is obviously really rich, who is flaunting his riches, who is just being snooty and looking down on people. And he talked about when he was younger, he was poor and grew up in this trailer home, and the rich people that he would encounter all treated him that way. So him finally becoming this character is like, okay, I finally get to be that person who can act out how all these rich people treated me and kind of act out how I view them. And it was almost like he was taking his power back and almost like he was standing up in a way for the little boy version of him. I was like, oh, okay, we got to see a little bit there. A little bit. We saw some old pictures. He talked a little about his childhood. Again, that section only lasted for a short amount of time, but I was like, okay, we're getting there. We're getting something. So I'm probably not going to get all the things I actually want out of this docuseries. I'm going to continue to watch, obviously, because I promised I would watch it to the end. But I'm getting something. So there was a little bit there. So yeah, they did so many things during this era. They even brought in Mike Tyson at one point to play the referee for one of the big matches, I think for WrestleMania, which was huge and had everybody tuned in. And this was after, I mean, Mike Tyson has always been a larger than life figure, but I believe that this was shortly after his sexual assault allegations, I think against his wife or against, I don't know how many cases he had. I'm sure there were multiple. That was a interesting time. This is all before the Me Too movement. So cases like that were big because you didn't hear cases like that too often. They weren't as frequent as we hear now. But it was after that that Vince McMahon still had him do that because, I think Vince McMahon as a business person understands that all mentions in the media or press are all good because somebody is saying your name, whether it's for a good reason or a bad reason. No matter what Mike Tyson did, people know Mike Tyson's name. He is a draw. His name is a draw. And the thing is, even if it's something bad, everybody in the world is not going to share the same opinion that he did something wrong. Unfortunately, when something like that happens, when it's a sexual assault case, you'll have half the people saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe he did this. I hope he gets prosecuted to the extent of the law." And the other people like, she's probably lying. I don't know if I believe her. Who would do that? Mike Tyson don't need to do that. He can have anybody he wants. You have people on both sides of the fence. But because you have people on both sides of the fence, that means if you have something like this where he is the referee of this huge WrestleMania event, you're going to have plenty of people tuned in who are still fans of his and want to see what he's going to do. Especially because he kind of butted heads, at least his character, butted heads with Stone Cold's character leading up to WrestleMania. So people were very curious about what was going to take place. So one of the things Vince McMahon said, which I thought was interesting, he said, performing is easy, being yourself is the difficult part. And actually, I think that's indicative of how this docuseries has gone thus far. He's a performer. Even when he's sitting down talking about the business, talking about this wrestler who left and that wrestler who left and this happened, he is still technically performing, I feel like. So when he said being yourself is difficult, I 1000% understand that from his perspective, and probably from the wrestler's perspective, it's probably a little hard too. When you've built this persona and people know you as this, they know you as Stone Cold, they know you as The Rock, they know you as The Undertaker and Kane and the Hardy Boys and all that stuff. It is hard to be yourself because people already have an idea of who you are based off of this character that you portray. And you get so stuck into that character that sometimes it's probably hard for you to break out of that character. And so I get it. I do understand. And so they talk about The Rock coming on the scene and how he wasn't popular at first. Like he's a third or fourth generation wrestler, which I knew because I was all about The Rock as well when he came out. And then when The Rock turned quote unquote bad, not even bad, The Rock turned into the person almost like Stone Cold, where he's not necessarily cursing and drinking beer, but it's basically like, okay, well, none of y'all people got to say. You can boo me, you can applaud me, you can love me. I don't care. I'm here to stay. I'm doing what I need to do. And once he showed the audience that he didn't care about their approval, that's when they all gave him the approval. And he shot up like a rocket to the point where now everybody knows the name Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but most younger generations don't know him as a wrestler. They only know him as the Fast and the Furious and all of these movies that he's done. And it's like, it's crazy to me that so many people don't know different sides of some of these artists, actors, whatever, who have been in the game for so long because they just know them as this one central thing. It's just like the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Everybody knows Candy. I won't say everybody. People who love that show, they know Candy as the Real Housewife of Atlanta. They do not know Candy from the group Escape. I grew up with Escape. I've never even watched one episode of any Real Housewives show. But again, it just goes to show, different generations know different things and know you for different things. I think it is great for Dwayne The Rock Johnson. As a wrestler, he's probably the most successful actor. Batista is cool too. I never watched Batista wrestle. That was kind of after I stopped watching. But the fact that Batista did all the stuff that he's done with Marvel, he's getting paid as an actor. Like he's getting big bucks as an actor. And everybody's not able to make that transition and definitely not able to make that transition successfully like The Rock has. So was fine with it. I'm proud of him. Do your thug thizzle Wody. I'm not mad at it. So after they talk about The Rock, they talk again about the women and just some of how basically WWF was criticized for some of the sexual content. Like they said, they had women who were dressed in bras and panties who were wrestling. They had a character on there who was basically a pimp, and he had women out there, and he's talking to his opponent, and he's like, "Yeah, just pick any one of my hoes." It's like, okay. They have a scene where this wrestler is big black guy, I don't remember his name. He's in the back, and this woman is in front of him, and you just see her slowly go down, his eyes on the back of her head to simulate that she is giving him head. And just, like I said, the suck it thing, and just like a lot of stuff that would not fly now. Back then, everyone loved. And yes, people criticized it. Yes, people like, oh my gosh, this isn't made for kids. How dare you make this? Blah, blah, blah. But this is what people want. That not the generation, that age group of 18 to 35-year-old men, that's exactly the kind of stuff that they want to see. So of course you're going to feed into that. Like, why wouldn't you? This is a business. It's about making money. It's about making sure you have eyes on these matches. So they did exactly what they were supposed to do, right? So, and look, I'm looking at my notes. I put finally. They talked about women for all of 90 seconds, and yeah. And one thing that I noted is that when they talked about how women were exploited, Vince McMahon said that the women, whenever they would show women like in bra, panties, and all that stuff, he said that was some of our highest rated viewings. But he never said that it was wrong. I was kind of wanting him to say like, "Oh, that was some of our highest rated stuff." I mean, looking back on it now, we probably shouldn't have done that. Or looking back on it now, I would make different decisions. He just said, "Oh, that was some of our highest rating stuff." Nothing else. And maybe there is no remorse, but at least you could have said something after the fact, like that wouldn't fly now. We would never think to do anything like that. But at the time, it worked. And at the time, it wasn't looked at like it would be looked at now. Something after this was the highest rated thing. So it's kind of disappointed he didn't say more. So after they talked about that, they talked about May 23rd, 1999. Now, I'm slightly familiar with this story and I've heard about it and researched it a little bit. But basically, we talked about Bret Hart in the last episode. Bret Hart had a brother named Owen. Owen stayed with WWF after Bret went to WCW. Bret believes that Owen was unfairly treated in terms of not really getting the really good matches, kind of being made fun of, like made to wear these really dumb costumes, and kind of like he was made a joke of. He wasn't taken seriously. So on May 23rd, 1999, they had a live event. I don't think it was a regular wrestling event. It might have been, but basically they had a live event. And Owen Hart was supposed to fly in. He had this costume that was blue and white, and it was like a bird, so he had like wings. And they're supposed to like fly him in on the rafter, and like he's gonna land in the middle of the ring. So the lights are out, the audience can't see what's going on, and somehow Owen Hart is not flying, but basically they're somehow he ends up in the ring. And he's in the ring when the lights come up. All the people who were there, because it's a live audience, they just see a bunch of people surrounding Owen Hart, a bunch of medical personnel, and then they take him on a like a not a crash car, but take him on a cart and take him out of the arena. And you see the announcers who were sitting there, and they looked humbled, and you could tell they were completely out of character. They, their characters normally like normally like really high paced and like punchy and all that stuff, and they both just looked so incredibly sober. And they were like, yeah, this. They were like, folks, is not part of the show, and Owen Hurt, he's hurt really bad. And then they came back and they were like, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we have to say that Owen Hurt has passed away. He died at the arena, but he's saying it in the microphone, but it's the microphone isn't loud enough to it's not like he's announcing it to the live crowd that's there. He's announcing to the people who are watching, I believe, or at least to the camera people or whoever. So Vince McMahon in that moment, and that was the first match, he had the decision to make. Do I cancel this match or do I let the show go on knowing that the audience hasn't seen anything? Because he's like, if the audience had seen something, I would have immediately canceled it and like, no, because that's traumatic, blah, blah, blah. He's like, but they didn't see what happened. So he decided to let the show go on. And Bret Hart's being interviewed and he was like, he's like, I was pissed. He was like, there was still blood from my brother in that ring. And from what he was told, some of the wrestlers were there when Owen Hart's body was like past them, not walked past them, but was wheeled past them. They have to see their friend who they've been wrestling with for years, basically dead on a gurney, and then have to go out there and be this character like, yeah, let's go, I'm gonna kill him. And just the trauma, and again, to a ring that still has the blood of Owen Hart on it. So obviously it was a really traumatic thing for everybody. And Bret Hart and his family, they sued Vince McMahon and WWF for like wrongful death. And I believe they settled out of court. But then Vince McMahon found out after the fact that it wasn't their fault. There was a something faulty in the actual costume. So Vince McMahon and WWF sued the manufacturer, and I believe that they won because technically it's because of the faulty costume that this happened. But it Bret Hart asked a question that I thought was interesting. He was like, if it was Vince McMahon's son who had gone up there and who had fell in the ring, whose blood is still in the ring, and who died at the scene, would Vince McMahon still let the show go on? And then the cut to Vince McMahon, he's like, yeah, I know Bret Hart, was like, if that was my son, what would I do? He was like, if it was me, yes, the show would go on. If it was me who went up there and died, of course I'm gonna be like, you know what? I want the show to continue. Wheel me out of here, make sure the show continues. That's not what Bret Hart asked, though. He didn't say if it was you, because he knows what you would have done. He said if it was your son. That's the question he asked, and that's the question that Vince McMahon did not answer. And obviously, you know, when you're in that situation, you have two sides that you're dealing with in terms of making decisions. You have the business side, and then you have the human side. And I feel like for Vince McMahon, the business side wins out way more than the human side. I feel like. And that's pretty much how the episode ended. But one thing they did do is that they showed a really quick montage of clips, and some, I guess, are going to be in episode 5. And one of them was of police tape in front of a house. And then the clip after that was a picture of Chris Benoit covered in blood. Now, if you don't know the story of Chris Benoit, because again, this is during the time when I was actively watching wrestling, so I'm very familiar with that particular story. So I was kind of happy to see that, like, okay, good, you're gonna really, and I mentioned that before, to explore some of the deaths that have happened in WWE. And not saying it's the fault of Vince McMahon or anything like that, but some of it has to do with decisions that some of these wrestlers have made because of repeated head injury or whatever. So Chris Benoit, um, health challenges that people have had, like Black China and Eddie Guerrero. It'd be nice to kind of explore that a little bit more. So I was like, okay, they're going to talk about Chris Benoit, at least in episode 5. So I'm going to look at that fairly shortly. I still want to see a little bit more about Vince's life, but I was where We're more than halfway done with the series now, so I don't have much hope that I'm going to learn much. And I think I'm okay with it. Now I'm okay with it. I'm getting what I need to get. I'm still learning a lot about WWF and WWE. Still learning a lot about Vince McMahon and his role and everything, and just kind of the pioneer that he's been in this business. I am learning about that. It would be nice to learn more about his family, though. Like I said, his wife was only interviewed in the first episode. We haven't seen her since episode 1, and we're now about to be in episode 5. So, I mean, can we talk about like how you met her? Can we talk about why you asked her to marry you? Can she talk about why she stayed married to you this long despite their allegations of sexual assault? Can we talk to your kids about how you were as a dad? The kids have been in every single documentary, and every time they're just commenting on something to do with wrestling. Yeah, I think my dad got a bad rap when he made this decision at this match. And yeah, my dad was pissed when this wrestler left. It's nothing about, at home, my dad is like this. He is so different than who he is over here. Like, there's none of that. Another interesting thing, when he was talking about his alter ego of Mr. McMahon, who, again, being this rich tycoon, who's pretty much an a-hole and who, flaunts his wealth and just kind of looks down on people. They asked him in the documentary, are you like your character? He was like, no, I'm nothing like that character. He's like, it's an exaggeration of the rich people that I saw growing up, and I'm nothing like that character. Every other person who commented said the exact opposite. They were like, he is either exactly like that or that's him turned up to about a level 10, but that's still him. That's not an exaggeration. This is still very much Vince McMahon in real life. Even his kid said that. So it just led me to believe that Vince McMahon, the man, he is all about image of his brand and image of himself. He's not going to hold himself accountable. He's not going to say anything bad about himself. He's not going to admit to any wrongdoing, not going to admit to making any wrong decisions. That just doesn't seem to really be his way. So we're about to be in episode 5. We're 2 episodes away from this being done, and probably the last episode I'll give my final thoughts on what I thought about it. But thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you are watching the series along with me. And if you're not, hopefully this is enough for you, that you're like, you know what, Mama 2 Wife 1 broke down everything. I don't even need to watch it. That'd be great for me too. But make sure again that you guys subscribe to my channel, like this video, share this video, and comment below so we can discuss what we've watched together, hopefully. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.